Hey everyone, it's me. Well, I have some opinions, but I also have some just information that I've researched and want to put out into the universe so that we all can learn together. So this is going to be it may seem kind of random the things that I talk about or mention, but I'm doing it for a specific purpose. So I don't usually get on here and just like ramble about shit that doesn't matter. It's usually relating to something that's going on in the community or in just real life. There's there's so many things, gosh. But let's see where I want to start because I have like bullet points of what I want to talk about. And I've actually researched quite a bit on some of what I'm going to talk about. Now this is not like I attended a college course or have a degree or anything like that. This is just something I spent time looking up and researching and formed my opinions and thoughts about it. So, just for clarity, I'm not claiming to be an expert or certified in any area of what I speak about, with the exception of nursing. I do have knowledge in that. But so, if you're interested in the things that I talk about, do your own research. I'm just going to discuss my opinions and my interpretation of what I have researched. And if I get something wrong and, somebody listening actually has more knowledge than me in this area, please leave a comment and tell me. I am not perfect and I do not know everything. So if you know that I've gotten something wrong please feel free to leave it in the comments and correct me because I want to know. That's why I do all the researching. So my last video that I made about BJ got a lot of people talking and, believe me, I could have made an hours long video of all of the times that she has fallen asleep, nodded off to sleep. However you believe it happened, okay? There is so many clips of that. Like, I could have made that so much longer, but I didn't. And the reason I chose to start at the months where she would allegedly be pregnant. And I did that for a reason because I hear Craig in reality and, all of this. Y'all are being horrible to a pregnant woman. You're stressing a pregnant woman. Look what you're doing to a pregnant woman. Well, I made this video to say the only one hurting the pregnant woman is the pregnant woman herself. If you're not getting the sleep you need, if you're not taking medications correctly, whatever it may be, if you can't turn off the internet and take care of yourself, it's not our responsibility. And, I know everybody has their own opinions of what's going on there, and that's fine. Everybody can have that. We have freedom of speech. We can do that. So I'm going to just start off with my BJ stuff and get it done and out of the way because I know some people are tired of hearing about her, and you can fast forward through this part if you want. I just have a few things I want to address with things that I've heard going on over there. It's getting really difficult to even watch her because she's gotten so freaking boring, which it is. Either food, sweeping, or gifts being discussed over there. That's pretty much it. And yeah, it's hard to watch. But, it's important to watch also because she is still trying to do some quote true crime streams that she is still completely being disrespectful and sleeping through. I she just made up with Jay because Jay came in her chat and apologized and things, and that just happened. And then she turns around and takes Jay's stream and plays it pretty much straight through with no commentary. Just stole her content flat out. And doesn't think twice about it. And everybody else, she's a pregnant mom. She says it's 3 in the morning. What do you expect? Why are you going live at 3 in the freaking morning then? Do it a time when you can stay awake. You did your drama earlier in the night. Switch it around, maybe. I don't know. But besides the fact of disrespecting the family, the victims, she's stealing content. I mean, she does it for law and crime, just different people that she takes their work and just plays it. And you can't just make an announcement because this is what she does. I'm going to play this video by so and so, and this is being used for fair use. That's not how that goes. That's not what fair use is. You can't just say it's fair use and then play it. That's ridiculous. And even stopping it to have a discussion about a troll in chat or stopping it to say, wow, I'm trying to process that or whatever, that's not enough for fair use either. You are supposed to transform it into your own work, add your own thoughts, add your own commentary. Stop it frequently. Talk about what you're watching. That's fair use, not an announcement. This is fair use. I mean, and this is why, I can stop doing a whole lot, on BJ, but I'm not going to let up on the true crime part of it because of the disrespect, and just that should not be a representation of what true crime on YouTube is. So for people that stumble across that, I don't want them thinking that's true crime and believing what they hear. It's unbelievable to me sometimes whenever I hear Craig in the background talking about, I swear last night, he was literally saying that he had watched Alex Jones and it was happening to Alex too. They were getting CPS calls over and over again, and they just don't, he didn't even talk about it. He doesn't mention it anymore, but it's gotten really bad lately. And Craig is like, that's just what happens when you get big, I guess. You get harassed, you get these CPS calls, and it's the price of fame. He said, we just don't have the fortune. He said, if we did, the only thing we're lacking is a security guard standing at the door. And he was dead serious. And I'm like, wow, delusional. I mean, seriously, there's like 6 people interacting in her chat, and no, y'all aren't famous. You're not famous. You don't need a security guard at the door, which, by the way, is not going to stop CPS calls. So that didn't make any sense either. And that's something that I'm going to be discussing when I finish all of this, is I have very much looked into CPS protocols in North Carolina, and I want to put some actual factual information out instead of people guessing and assuming and all of this stuff. I want to put out things that are from their policy book and the laws. So that's what I'm going to be doing in the latter half of this video. But, and look, I'm going to be pretty candid with my thoughts and opinions here. And it may offend people, and I apologize, but, we all have the right to our opinions, right? And I'm pretty open. But here's my opinion on this whole thing. I don't think at this point anyone should call CPS. We know CPS has been involved many times, and there has been corrections made in the home after CPS has come. I do believe that they have had quite a few visits from CPS. I don't think they're lying about that. But they also don't close those cases on the same day. Also, the fact that they attended a child's medical appointment is very telling. And I don't know why she thought putting that out here was a good idea. And then I am going to say, in my opinion, and I'm allowed to say this, I think that she is on a maintenance drug. And that is perfectly fine. And maintenance drugs are amazing. They help people. They are a godsend to get people help to get off of substances. I'm not knocking that in any way. Here's my thought process behind that. So, first of all, and we've talked about this probably ad nauseum, about the signs of being sleepy versus nodding, and watching her on camera and how, like, unaware she even seems that she's doing it. And so that there's that part. But then there's another thing that I keep hearing, because BJ plays semantics. Never forget that. If you are trying to get an answer out of BJ, she will use semantics. You have to listen to what she's not saying instead of what she is saying, because that's how she words things, so that she's not actually telling you a lie, but she's not actually telling the truth either. So, for example, my opinion is that she's on Suboxone, okay? So, her big, every time it's brought up that she might be on substances, she says the same thing. CPS has checked me out. My kids would be gone if I was using. I'm sober. I'm not using anything. Over, and she uses the CPS drug test as the verification that shows that she's not. Well, what wasn't tested on that 10 panel is Suboxone, and you can see it at the bottom of the sheet that she showed that they can test for it. They didn't. So she can come out here and proclaim that she passed her drug test with flying colors when CPS came, but she could do that and still be on a maintenance medication. And I know people are like, well, maintenance meds don't make you nod. Well, true, unless your dose is wrong, unless you're misusing it, unless you're mixing it with other things. There are a lot of different things that could contribute to why she would nod off of the maintenance med. But that is just my belief. And I'll go into it more when I discuss CPS, but they have protocols for babies that are born when a mother is on a maintenance drug or on substances. So can repeatedly, be honest. She's honestly telling us that she passed the drug test and CPS didn't find anything wrong. And that would be completely true because they didn't test for Suboxone, and they wouldn't. If she says, I have a prescription for this, and shows them, or they call the doctor and verify, they're not going to test for that. And there's nothing they can do. It's not illegal to take a prescription medication. BJ is likely wide awake during the visits when they come. They're not watching. I don't care what she says. They're not watching her YouTube channel, whatever. They're coming in and getting a snapshot of what they presents during that short time period. So, but there's something with her that confuses me because when you're in a maintenance program like that, or even pain management, whenever you go into your monthly visit, you will get a drug screen. And it isn't just a little 10 panel, positive or negative. It's testing actual levels of the drug in your body, levels of the metabolite of the drug in your body. And they do that because they're trying to tell if you are misusing it, if you're selling it, that sort of thing. That's how they can kind of keep track of what you're doing through the month. Because say you get your prescription on the first of the month, and that first week you take double the dose, and then by the week before you have to go back to get your refill, you're going to be short. You're going to be running out. And normally it's like, I've seen people, you have to remember I worked in hospice, so I dealt with pain meds a lot with my patients. Even so much as like cutting or tearing a film, because it is a sublingual film that goes in your mouth. But I've seen when they're running low on that last week before a refill, they'll even cut the strip in half so that they aren't completely without it, but they still can overuse that first week. Am I making any sense? I don't know, but I know what I'm saying in my mind. This is not coming out that way. But the problem with doing that is when you go in, because you're taking such a low dose of it that week before, when you go in, your levels aren't going to match what you should be taking. So that's where I'm thinking there has to be something else with it that is causing the nods. And I don't know. I mean, there could be lots of other things. Over-the-counter sleep meds on top of it. Just other gabapentin. I think I've heard people mention in the past that she was on gabapentin, which is believable because she has lymphedema. When you have lymphedema, there's a lot of swelling in the lower leg, and it will compress nerves, and you will get nerve pain. So I could understand if she's on gabapentin, and mixing those two together could cause drowsiness. So there's many different things that could be happening. But another thing that kind of tipped me off was whenever she made a comment about having a stack of drug tests that she could show. And that is very telling of someone who is in a monthly maintenance program and is getting regular drug screens. So that's just what I think. I think that she doesn't fully understand how CPS will work when it comes to maintenance meds. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it one more time. I think the way that this whole pregnancy announcement happened was extremely odd for BJ. Those of us who have been around for years know that BJ thrives on attention and praise and being showered with gifts and money, and that's what she lives for. So to wait that long to tell the internet, or to tell anybody, I guess, it's strange. There's something behind that. And it's either, in my opinion, it's either that she was waiting closer to time of the due date because then people wouldn't have time to question things. Does that make sense? Like people, if she were to come out at 8 months pregnant and say, I'm having a baby next month and we don't have anything for it, people are going to rush to get her everything because, oh my God, what if the baby comes early? They don't have anything. They got to have time to put it together. They don't have time to sit and think about the questionable things around it. So that is one option. And the other is what she said repeatedly, that she didn't want to tell anybody because she was afraid CPS would be called, which I also don't understand because why, if you're not doing anything wrong and they're calling to report that you're pregnant, it's not going to affect anything. So it's really odd to me that every time she talks about not telling anyone, she mentions CPS. So that's just my opinion on it. But she's not, she thinks that she's kind of hiding out from it or was going to be able to hide out from it if that was her plan. I don't think that she understands that whenever you go into the hospital there, well, first of all, now that we have electronic records, the first thing they do when you come in there in labor, they're going to pull up anything that they can get access to of your record for your prenatal care. If they want to know if there was anything abnormal, they want to know any ultrasounds that were done, any measurements that were done, they're going to look back to see if you had complications in any of your prenatal visits. They look for that, okay? And no, it is not against the law to get no prenatal care. And I know we do not know if she's had it or not, right? You can't trust anything that BJ says. But if she has had prenatal care, Craig knows nothing about it. Because I'm sorry, but drunk Craig is honest Craig. As much as I dislike him, he even said the other night, I wish that we could just be transparent in ourselves. And so it's odd. So he has no idea about any prenatal care. So if she's had it, they have not talked about it. He doesn't know about it, which is odd. I would have my 3D ultrasound by this. I think they do 40 now. I'm old. I would have that, carrying it around with me everywhere, showing people, because I did. I was like, look at the little profile, look at his nose, look at this. You know, you get excited. But Craig hasn't even seen the sonogram yet, so it's really weird. And again, it's not illegal to not get prenatal care. But when you're high risk, and if the baby has any issues after birth, it will be something that CPS will be called for. And I'm not saying that like as a threat or in a threatening way or anything like that. I don't think that she's going to get a baby taken away from her, any of that. I think that she doesn't understand that hospitals employ social workers, and those social workers get referrals to see patients. They get referrals from doctors, from nurses, to go in and assess for needs, things like that. And you would be amazed at how sharp some of the nurses are. Whenever you've been nursing for a certain amount of time, you start to pick up on subtle things, interactions, bonding. Just there's certain things that we can see happening and identify that something's off, that a person, not a normal person, but another person that isn't a nurse wouldn't think anything about. They're pretty sharp at picking up on things. So if there's any question, they are going to do a referral to a social worker. Now, if what I believe is right and she is on a maintenance med, that will automatically trigger for a CPS referral. And that doesn't mean that they're going to come in and take her baby away or whatever, because it's a maintenance med. It's not illegal. But it will, trigger that to happen. And I don't know if that's the reason. It really could have been that she was trying to wait to the last minute so that people would rush out and buy everything. By the way, whoever is going around saying that the return policy is you return gifts and they notify the person that bought the gift and send the money back to them is completely lying. That's not how that goes. If you return something off of a registry, the person that it was gifted to gets the money from it. You get it in credit or gift cards. The buyer will never know that you returned it. There's no way for them to. And there is absolutely no reason why BJ needed doubles and triples of everything. I don't care if she's furnishing every member of her family. It's ridiculous. And it is not that hard to do Amazon returns. You simply go on there, say you want to return it and why. They email you a label. You take the box to the UPS store. They scan your label and ta-da, you're done. Like, that's a big hassle, It's really sus. Like, that whole, if it hadn't been such an extravagant list that is still ongoing, and if there hadn't been multiples of several things, I wouldn't think that much about it. But it's odd. It's just really odd. I've never seen a baby registry like that. And never seen a baby that the family didn't want to buy some things for the baby. Like, if I were pregnant, my mom would be like, oh, let's decorate the nursery. Let's go get this. Let's do this. She would want to buy things for me because that's what moms do. And I know BJ's mom isn't here for that, and that's terrible. But Craig's mom is. It's just kind of, and she says that her dad was in the delivery room with each of her children. So, she makes it sound like her and her dad are extremely close. I would never have my dad in the room during that, but she did. So they're close. So it's odd, too, that her dad found out about this from the internet, supposedly. Not sure that I believe that, but because I've also heard BJ say before that her dad would be mortified if he heard her talking the way she does on here. Because from my understanding, they're very religious, and she grew up very religious. So she sounded like he would never be watching her online because he'd be mortified by how she was talking. And she's so close to him. He was in the delivery room for all the other kids. But for some reason with this child, she didn't tell him. And he suddenly started coming online. And found out she's pregnant. It's weird. I don't know. It was just all really odd. It just is. And, she was like, no, Craig was just joking whenever he said something about maybe it's twins. That was just a joke and people took it seriously. And then he said, well, you never know. They could be laying on top of each other. And then she chimes in and she's like, yeah, one could be blocking the other one or some weird stuff. And thank God somebody in her comment section has some sense and said, at 7 months, you would know that there was a second baby in there. And she was like, oh, I know. She's like, he was just joking about that. So weird. And just like Granny predicted, once people started mentioning that she wasn't talking about the baby moving or excited about the baby or anything like that, that she would hear that because she listens to everything. And then she would start talking about the baby kicking. And of course, that's what she did last night. She was like, oh, baby's kicking me hard. And I don't have any explanation for it because, like, she looks pregnant. I don't know how she could be at this point and not be pregnant, how she would plan on pulling that off or whatever. It doesn't make any sense. And then, you've got Craig's mom and her cat and going along with things. And so there's just so many weird things about it. And like my gut is going, something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. I'm getting that feeling of it, but I just don't know what it is. And I do think that they are trying to set it up that she is going to go early and the baby is going to end up in the NICU because the stress from YouTube caused her to deliver early, because they mention that almost nightly now. So I do feel like that's very purposeful in setting up a situation where if she is on maintenance drugs and the baby has to go to the NICU to withdraw, that their excuse for it is going to be because the stress from YouTube. Like, I don't know if maybe she's actually farther along than they're saying, and they're going to then say that the baby was early when it really isn't. Like, I don't know what they're going to do about that. But the other thing that I was saying a while ago is, it is not illegal to not get prenatal care, but it can be seen as medical neglect whenever you have your own health issues. And I'm not saying she hasn't gone, but she claims asthma and it sounds pretty bad. When I tell you that she sounds worse than some of my end stage COPD patients, I'm not lying. Her lungs sound horrible at times. That is a concern when you're pregnant. That is a high risk. Her age is high risk. She has lymphedema. That doesn't go away. She has that. And she can get cellulitis more easily in that leg with lymphedema, but she has it. That's a circulation thing. I mean, she just has comorbidities that contribute to a need to be watched closely through a pregnancy. And I don't think she has, in my opinion. I will say that I will not be watching much once she has the baby because it's difficult enough right now with the chaos there between her falling asleep, her chewing with her mouth open into the mic, her cooking food, Craig talking about his game, talking about sex, kids coming in and out of the room, her not having anything prepared. Like, that's chaos enough for me. I can't add a baby crying on top of that. I can't do it. Plus, I just have horrible thoughts about what could happen with that baby there and her falling asleep, because she told this story the other day about she came home with her first son, and at the time our daughter was 3 years old, and she tells the story of coming in. She laid the baby on the ground in the living room on a blanket and went into the kitchen to do something, and when she came back in the room, her 3-year-old had picked up the 3-day-old baby and was holding him, and she giggled and thought that this was just the cutest thing. No, it's not. A baby that's 3 days old cannot support their own head. A 3-year-old picking them up off the ground and holding them is a terrible thing. So many things could have happened. And she just thought that was a cute story. And they're already talking about which child will take care of the baby when they're asleep, when mom's asleep. And I don't know. I don't know that I can listen to it when it starts, but it's crazy. And I don't know, another thing, she keeps talking about, we'll hear Craig like going off in the background, and what he's saying sounds crazy, and he's yelling at people, and she'll be like, don't mind him, he's playing his game. And so then she goes on to describe, well, we have a his and her desk, so he can game on his side and I do my stuff on mine. And I'm sitting here thinking, whose idea was this? Because she was trying to do a true crime live, quote true crime, and he was playing his game, a few feet from her, and he's yelling out things and cussing, and she's over here talking about, God, I can't remember what the topic was, but it was a true crime topic. And, she's like, well, it's the desk, and it's just not a good idea. It's also not a good idea for Craig to be involved in any true crime case that has any sexual component to it at all. I'm sorry, but that is how I feel. And most of you know that's one of my triggers. The way that he was talking about, oh, there's so many things. One night it was when they were talking about the Duggars, and he started talking about what would you do if that was your son? It would be hard to turn your son in and ruin his life. And of course, yeah, it's like it would be hard to well, first it would be hard to come to terms with the fact that your child did that to someone else at all. And it would be hard to turn them in, but you have to. Like he was basically saying, well, what if it was, and he names one of their kids, and he's like, well, we send him off to juvenile detention and somebody assaults him, and then his life has changed forever, and then his life is ruined, and you don't want to put him into the system, and he, all of this stuff, and it's just like, he is incapable of thinking about there is a victim whose life will never be the same. There is a victim who will struggle immensely with what happened. But he can't see that. All he can think about is his feelings and himself. And, he said, I think military school would be enough. That's as far as I would go. And then he was talking about with the Duggars that they needed to have their kids involved in things so they weren't sitting around with each other. And starts this very ironic rant about kids need to be involved in sports, extracurricular activities, that his parents made sure that he was into sports so that he didn't get into trouble, and how kids need to have them on the go and out doing things so that they don't have time to sit around and get in trouble. And it was just all like, wow, are you hearing yourself? Because, yeah. Then they come onto the topic of teachers again. I don't know how they keep ending up on this, but they come back to another case where there is a young, pretty teacher who was having relations with a student. And of course, Craig's responses are inappropriate. And it's the same, well, I just want to know, is she married? And basically, is he not functioning right? Gross. Why? And then they're talking, and BJ is laughing. Like, they're talking about this horrific topic, and that it actually happened to someone, and she's, like, laughing about it. And so, yeah, there he was just making all kinds of just inappropriate comments. And I don't know why they keep finding these cases that are about the young, pretty teachers, because he cannot stop himself from making gross comments. I mean, he makes them all the time anyway, which makes the reasoning for them to have desks right next to each other not a smart one, because he's sitting there and hears her talking about things, and, there's only certain things that he picks up on and responds to. And when you start talking about young, pretty teachers, he perks up and wants to join in the conversation that he needs no part of, because it's not something to be taken lightly. And it was also, there was so many interesting just little comments that I catch. And when I hear them, I'm like, what does that mean? What? This is so weird. But there was a point last night where I guess Craig had actually grilled and cooked food or whatever. And he comes in with food and gives a piece to Brittany to try. He gave her this and she's trying it and she apologizes. She's like, I'm sorry, guys. He doesn't take no for an answer. I just had to try this. And then the people in the chat were like, oh, look how sweet Craig is. Look, he's sweet. And she says, he has his moments, guys. He's not all mean. Like, it was a weird statement to make. It's like the other thing that happened where she was saying that she had pulled into the driveway and she was in that low car and had trouble getting in and out. And he called her and asked if he needed to come open the gate for her or close the gate because he felt bad for her. And everybody's like, oh, look, he's sweet. He cares. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? This is what shows that he's a great guy and cares. And no, my husband would have been standing at the end of the driveway waiting for me to come and then open the gate for me, let me drive through and close the gate. And he would do that if it was storming outside. He would not care. He would do it without asking or feeling sorry for me. The chat kind of did the same thing with the little piece of meat that he brought to her to eat. They're like, oh, look, he's sweet. And she's like, he's not all mean. It's like, you'll feel so happy. Which goes back to another comment that Craig made where he's like, they're just jealous that we're these happy people. And then he thinks about it for a second and is like, well, really, we're not that happy. It's like, oh, really? We couldn't tell. We had no idea. We thought you were June and wore Cleaver. We had no idea. There's just little statements that come out here and there, and it's interesting because I do also think that they do not engage with each other until the evening when they're online. I don't think they talk during the day. I don't think they interact much at all. They usually the other one doesn't know what the other one has done all day long. Like, it's odd. It's not a big house, like, and we get to hear their normal everyday conversation when she hits the live button. And then we have the usual ignorant comments, reality saying that we don't like it when they talk about religion. We don't like it if they're happy. We don't like it if they're laughing. We don't care about any of that, really, seriously. And then, with another group of mods leaving, she's talked a lot about the focus being on Craig and people not liking him and how offensive that is and why is that a reason to leave. And so she comes on and says, like, I'm open to constructive criticism. We all know that's a lie. She's not at all. But she's telling the people in her chat, come to me and vent to me if Craig upsets you. But she's not going to change anything. So they can come to her and vent, and she claims she's not going to get mad about it or upset, and she's going to understand. But it's going to go nowhere because she's not going to change anything. So she doesn't understand that that's not really a solution. Also, I've noticed, too, and I think we've talked about this before, I can literally tell if Craig is in the room or not as soon as BJ starts her live stream. Because if he is not in there, it is a very soft, demure, sad voice that's usually got some type of pity story to tell. She's wanting to ask her something. She's wanting to dry beg for something. It's playing the victim. But when Craig is in the room, she doesn't do that. And I think it's because Craig would call her out for it. Like he's done in the past with things like she comes on and talking about she was so upset about the cat that died. And he's like, were you really? I don't think she can get away with a lot of that fake stuff with him in the room because he's going to say something, especially when he's intoxicated. So, but yeah, you can just listen and hear the difference in when she's going to be the whiny, beggy, crying person or, well, of course, if Craig's in the room, they start the live stream just having a regular conversation with each other. Like nobody is sitting in the chat waiting. She's always late, so they've been waiting an hour. She comes alive and then she talks about her day with Craig and they discuss the things they want to buy. And yeah, that's how it starts. It's freaking weird. Also, she's claiming that she was never friendly with Laura. And I'm finding my clips for that because I know I have them. She absolutely is friendly with Laura. After BJ's first CPS call, she became friendly with Laura. And I know that because I remember a lot of us going, how can you be so against this? But here you are being buddy-buddy with somebody. But now she wants to deny that. So I'm going to dig up the clips and show that she's once again lying about something. And I wish that she could look up cases before she starts her stream because she literally starts a stream and then starts pulling up articles, trying to find articles, reading little short articles, not knowing what she's talking about. It's not how you do true crime at all. It's just so irresponsible to come on and try to discuss a case whenever you don't know the basics of it. Like somebody in chat will just throw out the name and you're like, okay, you look it up and just start reading whatever. That's not the way you cover true crime. Also, BJ needs to learn the difference between being arrested and charged and then actually being guilty, because just because you get arrested doesn't mean that you're going to be found guilty. You can't use those words interchangeably because they are not the same. One other thing I want to mention there is that Craig made a really weird comment saying that BJ's ex-mods have a sexual fixation with her and are in the closet. This is another recurring theme with Craig, is he has a real problem with homosexuality because he will constantly talk about a straight guy wouldn't do that, and they act like ex-lovers. I think she's in the closet. There's constant talk like that in the background. Besides the fact that he uses the F slur many times, he is back there constantly talking about that. That comment was just gross. Why are you doing that? What they don't understand is some of these mods actually stay with BJ for, over a year. And BJ is dependent on them for her counseling. They're basically supposed to be there 24/7 so that if she's having a crisis, they can be there. They're on the phone with her most of the day. They're together all the time. They form, friendships. And whenever you finally wake up and realize that she was never a friend to you, that you were used, it's very hurtful. And of course, people want to speak out about it and, lash out against it. So they do talk about it a lot. They do go into chats and, voice their opinions now. And that's understandable. They're hurt. It has nothing to do with sexual attraction. I know that everything in Craig's life goes back to sex, but that is not a normal thing for people's brains to work that way. That's a Craig thing, and I don't know what it's about, but it's super weird and it's not appropriate. I see a lot on here where people use the whole, they did this to me, so I'm going to do it back to them, and it's okay because it's justified because they did it to me. So you can't say anything because I did it. And it's the same old saying that two wrongs don't make a right. And nothing will ever improve if we decide that we always have to one up everyone's behavior. Retaliation is never justified. Like, if someone steals your parking spot, you then parking in their spot doesn't make the situation right. It only compounds the issue and adds to it. Defending yourself feels right, but the moment you go to defend, you are accepting the other person's claim, the claim that you need to explain yourself. We search a lot for other people's acceptance, and you don't have to be narcissistic to worry about your image and how people perceive you. That's normal. So you want to, anytime there's false claims, your just immediate reaction is to jump in and start saying every reason why it's not true. But in arguments, defense is a loss in status. Defense hands away your authority. Questions get it back. Someone accuses you of something. Instead of responding by being indignant and claiming they're lying and that's not true and this is what happened and this is what happened, ask questions. Ask them how they came to that conclusion. Made them think that way. What proof do they have? Instead of being defensive, ask questions. Don't give them the win of making you explain yourself whenever you yourself know you're being truthful. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go into talking a little bit about CPS protocol. And I did look up things that are specific for North Carolina so that because every state is so different in how they handle things, process things, hotlines, all of that type of thing. And so I did a lot of research on this, read directly from the state CPS protocol and from their screening tool, directly from the screening tool that they use to evaluate whether they're going to pick up a case or not. Because I said this before, whenever someone calls in a report, it first goes through an intake person who will get all the information they need. Again, North Carolina is everyone is a mandated reporter state. And there's actually, I didn't realize how many states had this. So states with universal mandated reporters are Alabama, Delaware, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Maine, Wyoming, Maryland, Mississippi, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont. So in all of these states, every citizen there is required to make a report if they suspect abuse, if they have good reason to suspect abuse, okay? And it's a law. So if you don't report it and it further on in the investigation, it was learned that you knew about it and didn't report it, you can actually get charged with a misdemeanor crime for it. So for anyone who lives in the same state as BJ, who watches her and Craig barely coherent at night and the kids coming to wake them up, I can understand that they feel a need to report that. I do. I understand it. And it's the law. People act like it's just some state it is just a voluntary thing. If you want to, you can. There's certain people that are in healthcare, schools, things like that, that are deemed mandated reporters. But these states are deeming everyone mandated reporters. So it's not just like when you feel like it, you do it. If you see it, you're legally supposed to do it. So this is another reason why whenever they start talking about FOIAing CPS records and tracking down who made the call, I do not see how that's possible. And I'm going to read a little bit about what the law says about it. But there are people that, if they're in North Carolina, that are legally mandated to report. And there are definitely things that I could see, because everybody parents differently, right? And everybody looks at things differently. We may have led a very entitled and, fairly wealthy, well-to-do life, and are spoiled and catered to and all of that. And you watch something like what happens at BJ's home, and to that person, it seems very concerning because they live like that or don't live like that. And I do think that's a problem with universal mandated reporting, because there is such a disparity in poverty areas as opposed to the suburban and wealthier areas. And I'll talk about that in a minute too. And it doesn't escape me that BJ wants to talk about how that CPS has cleared her so many times. Nothing's wrong. They've said she's a good parent and there's nothing going on at all. And then when she covers true crime cases, she comes back and talks about, like, Sebastian, for example, that CPS failed Sebastian. And we do see many true crime cases that have had CPS involved and things were missed big time. And there's so many reasons why, but the main thing is, besides the understaffing, which I'm going to talk about, that these people come in to homes where they get a very short glimpse of interactions between the family. So things like more overt things like physical abuse, where there's signs of harm being done. Things like unsafe living conditions, where they walk in and there's holes in the floor, there's no running water, there's animal feces, whatever. Things like that, they can walk into a home and identify right away, okay, there's an issue. When you're dealing with things like neglect, which neglect is the number one reason for CPS reports in most states, but in North Carolina, definitely. It's harder to prove that because they come in and talk to a family who is going to present as a very loving parent who hypes their child and, all of this. And in a family like BJ's, we hear that their kids are terrified of CPS. So this tells me that they have spoken either around the children while, where they can hear, or directly to the children about the fact that CPS can take children out of homes, away from their parents. And we constantly hear her telling or saying out loud, her and Craig both, they want to take our kids from us. So they have developed in their children this fear of being open and honest to anyone because they don't want to be taken. No kid wants to be removed from their parent, even some that are very badly abused, still do not want to leave their parent. So, and the goal with CPS is always to try to keep the kid in the home with the family because that's the best place for them. The foster care system is severely lacking. We know that sometimes children experience more harm in the foster system than in the homes they came from. There's not enough people willing to foster. There's so many things that play into this, but whenever you are constantly drilling it into your child's head that they can take you away, even if they don't tell them what to say, those children are smart enough. They're at the age where they know that they need to say certain things to sound good. I 100% believe that no matter what they're asking those boys, they are not going to say anything that might get them taken away because they have now been instilled with this fear of it. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the process with CPS, specific to North Carolina. And this is a state-run agency, so there are many different sites where you can go on and read about this yourself. They are required to have transparency with people about all of the numbers, the reports they get, how many are removed from the house, how many are not even picked up. This is all public knowledge, and you can look it up at any time for your state, any other state. Like, it's not hard to find this. But so what happens? So social workers at the county DSS office receive the intake reports of alleged abuse or neglect, determine whether the allegations meet the legal definitions, and if it does meet the legal definition, that is then initiated into a CPS assessment. If the family needs services after the assessment, it goes into CPS in-home services until the conditions that led to the initial problem are resolved. And when the safety of the child cannot be assured, that is when they start looking at taking the child out of the home. But it is not their goal ever to go in and remove children. It's just not. And I hate when people say things like, I heard BJ say this the other day whenever she was talking about another CPS case. She's like, well, they're just lucky that she didn't get a caseworker that was having a bad day and came in there and just took it out on them and marked everything bad and took the child out. That's not how it works. You do not, one caseworker that's having a bad day cannot walk into your home and get your child taken because they were having a bad day. And I guarantee you, if they're having a bad day, the last thing they want to do is remove a child from a home because it's a lot more work. So it's ridiculous. When I hear those things, I'm like, give me a break. Like, it's not how this works. And I also heard, I was making a video, and in one of the clips I heard, Craig says, CPS being called is one of the most traumatic events. No, he said the most traumatic event in his life. Think about that. Why? What about CPS coming out was traumatic for it shouldn't be traumatic to anyone. If you don't fill your children full of fear, it won't be traumatic to them. Yes, they're going to have questions about why they were being asked all this, that sort of thing. It's not a pleasant thing for them, but it should not be traumatic. These people are trained to come out and talk to children, and they know how to speak to them on their age level and how to build comfort between them to talk. This should not be a traumatic experience unless there is, of course, some type of SA involved and there's exams and things that happen after that. But so once intake receives the call about suspected abuse, if you are calling just as a concerned citizen, you are allowed to remain anonymous. And that is a very important thing for people to be able to remain anonymous, because whenever you start having people revealed for calling in, you have the issue of people trying to retaliate, of it just starting more problems. So people, sometimes it's a family member that they see something happening and they don't want to be the one to call and turn their family member in. But because they know it's confidential and it's anonymous and it's going to be kept confidential, they have that courage to call in and say, hey, this is happening. And they don't have to reveal who they are, how they know them, anything like that, just what they've observed, who it is, and where it is, right? I think it's very important to keep people's anonymity because of that. You strip that away, and you're going to strip away, I believe, some of the more accurate reports. Because I think a lot of times there are family situations where maybe family that's outside of the home, a cousin or something, but they visit often and they see the behavior there in front of them. But they don't want to betray their family and turn someone in, so they are afraid to call. So it's so important to remain confidential with the people that need it, because otherwise they're not going to call and we're going to miss things. So they go through intake, and this is a screening form. It has to meet the requirements for being seen. The initiation time frame begins at the time the reporter contacts any local child welfare agency. Upon screen-in of the report, the response time will either be immediate, which means the initiation has to be done within 8 hours or before the 8 hours is up. And then there's a 24-hour assessment and a 72-hour. And it goes by the amount of harm the child might be in. If they are in imminent harm, it immediately goes into an investigative assessment, and that would have to be completed within 8 hours of initiation of that call. So, and these are a lot of times going to be the patients that are coming into hospitals with suspicious injuries, things like that. And the healthcare professionals are calling and saying, we don't feel safe sending this child home with the parents because this is very suspicious. So they will call and they will hold them there at the hospital or doctor's office until CPS is able to come out and do their evaluation. So those have to be done pretty quickly. And that is for actual abuse cases. And when I say abuse, I'm talking about like trafficking, physical abuse, SA, extreme corporal punishment, things like that. Those are going to be the ones where they're concerned about the child. They need to get there as soon as possible. So when a report of abuse, neglect, or dependency, and I'm reading this out of the state North Carolina General Statute Protocol for the Child Welfare System. When a report of abuse, neglect, or dependency is received, the director of DSS shall make a prompt and thorough assessment using either a family assessment response or an investigative assessment response in order to get the facts of the case. And again, the investigative response is going to be one where they are getting told that there are physical injuries. They are being told that it is something urgent that is immediately needing to be investigated. Okay. The other things fall into the family assessment response and is not as urgent. The extent of the abuse or neglect and the risk of harm to the juvenile in order to determine whether protective services should be provided or the complaint filed as a petition. So also that's something that happens is they do not pick up every report that is called in. There are certain things that it has to meet to go on to further assessment. So they can't just call up and say some ridiculous, there are things they're looking for. When the report alleges abuse, the director shall immediately but no later than 24 hours after the receipt of the report, initiate the assessment. When the report alleges neglect or dependency, the director shall initiate the assessment within 72 hours following the receipt of the report. To assess reports of abuse, neglect, or dependency, the agency may use either the family assessment response or the investigative assessment response, and that is the director's choice on what is used from there. Initiation of an investigation is defined as having face-to-face contact with the alleged child victim. So again, initiation timeframe begins at the time the reporter contacts any local child welfare agency. And initiation is complete when the face-to-face interviews have been completed with all the children residing in the home. Not necessarily the parents at that time. Their main concern is getting the children interviewed in that time frame. That's their initiation time frame. Immediate response time begins urgently after the reporter contacts the agency. Initiation must be completed no later than 8 hours from contact by reporter. 72 hours, initiation must be complete no later than 24 or 72 hours from initial contact with the reporter. So when a report includes any of the following allegations or conditions, that these are indicated by selection of the maltreatment allegation in their screening criteria and responses to the mandatory questions they must ask, the report will be assigned for the investigative assessment. And these include death of a child where maltreatment is suspected and other children are in the home, a yes response to the mandatory question, is this a near fatality, where the physician has determined that a child is in serious or critical condition as a result of maltreatment, human trafficking, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse with mental injury, encouraging or enabling delinquent offense, unsafe living conditions, child exposed to methamphetamine lab, medical neglect of a disabled infant with a life-threatening condition, or abandonment. And you can understand why those are pretty serious things that need to be immediately investigated. They don't need to do a family assessment and take it, ease into this. This is something urgent they need to address, and it's going to be investigative because of the allegations. When the report includes only neglect or dependency allegations, the worker will review the report for the following criteria. Child is in custody of child welfare or foster care. Physician or law enforcement officer has taken emergency custody. Child is admitted to the hospital due to suspected abuse or neglect. And then there's an other where the worker must document the reason for assigning it as investigative. So these are the few categories in neglect and dependency category that will also immediately go into investigative. Reports that do not include any of those criteria will then go on a family assessment track. We get in a situation in the healthcare field where people come in and have these outrageous stories of what happened to their children that don't match the injuries, and we don't feel safe sending them home. And if law enforcement or the doctor feels they are placing that child in harm, in certain states, they can take emergency custody of that child and not allow them to leave with the child until Child Welfare Services gets there to evaluate the situation. Because you can't knowingly send a child back to an abusive household where they have already sustained injuries. So the purpose of the screening and the response assessment is to assess whether a report meets the North Carolina DSS criteria for a CPS response. So this tool is completed on all calls to the county DSS in which the caller states they are concerned about a child's safety, well-being, or care. This includes reports by telephone and all other means. The county DSS worker who takes the information from the reporter and the supervisor and leadership who provide the second level review. The tool is completed immediately after a report has been made or while the report is being made. The tool guides whether a report requires a CPS response and, if so, the maltreatment type and how quickly to respond. The worker selects all criteria alleged for each maltreatment type from the screening criteria and makes the screening decision. Reports not meeting any of the screening criteria will not be accepted for CPS response. If a worker identifies a maltreatment type present, the worker completes response time and assessment track. Certain maltreatment allegations, if selected, will dictate the response track and time. If no response track and time automatically populates, the worker chooses that. So there's actually several levels of people that this goes through before it is approved to be a case that they pick up. because they don't pick up everything. At my job, when I was calling things in, there were things that I called in that got screened out, and it was shocking to me. But it's just every state has such different criteria for what they pick up and what they don't, and it's really interesting and doesn't make a lot of sense to me, if I'm honest. Um, so, and what CPS considers evidence of abuse is going to be information including, but not limited to, credible statements of the child, parent, or other persons, observations of the caseworker as they investigate, older records from CPS or medical records, x-rays, photographs, and all of this information is put together to create the full picture and decide on how to move forward. Assessment caseworker, the one who is actually going out to do the assessment, and a supervisor will communicate on the phone about the case and what is going on and why it's requiring the response time. And then this is something that kind of debunks the whole a caseworker that's having a bad day comes in and removes your kids. It's a 2-level decision making. Any decisions made by the caseworker have to go through the supervisor too. So it says 2-level decisions and reviews must occur on every CPS assessment at the following times: when the risk assessment and needs assessment are completed, prior to initiating or terminating the use of a temporary safety provider, at completion of the safety assessment and prior to implementation of a temporary parental safety agreement, before modifications of a safety agreement, at the case decision, and when there is a change in circumstances that impacts the safety and or risk to the children. 2-level decisions reviews must occur within the context of staffing between the county child welfare worker and a county child welfare supervisor at minimum. So there is your whole, they could have got a mad caseworker that came in and was having a horrible day and just decided they were going to take it out on somebody. No, it doesn't work like that at all. Checking criminal records for all case participants who are 16 years or older and live in the home, which if BJ is claiming that her older children live half-time in her home, then that means that they would have all been interviewed as well. Determining if there is a need to request 911 call logs on the relevant address and review that obtained information. And then, of course, they must document completion of all these things and findings as part of the chart. And a request for the 911 calls can provide additional info regarding child safety, especially regarding domestic violence in the home, and also decisions about the caseworker's safety approaching that home, knowing that if there is someone violent in the home before they go up to the door, and that's just kind of a safety thing. Once there's an assessment going on, and the family assessment is the one where they're going to come and speak to the children. They usually want to speak to the children before the parents even know that there's a case going on. So a lot of the times they will catch them at school. Like I said, I've had CPS in my life in the past. It wasn't traumatic, but they talked to my children while they were at school, and then the caseworker reached out to me after school was over for the day. And of course, I was fine with that. I had no issue, but they want to get the children as distanced from the parent as they can, because children who are afraid of their parents, of course, aren't going to tell as much if they know that the abusive parent is sitting in the next room and might overhear something. So it's just a better way of getting accurate information. I know a lot of people think that it's, doing it at school is hard for the kid because they're getting called out of class and it's a stranger talking to them. And it just depends on their age and, what they've been taught. I truly believe children do not know to fear CPS workers unless that has been ingrained into them, because they don't know. How do they know that? Kids aren't going around researching CPS. What does it mean? So, okay, and then they will find at least 2 collateral contacts, and those collateral contacts will be people that could possibly be considered as a temporary safety home should they need to send the children somewhere until a problem in the home is resolved. And then they will, of course, visit the home where the child resides, and they're going to look for things in the home that are unsafe. And so the purpose of the screening and the response assessment is to assess whether a report meets the North Carolina DSS criteria for a CPS response. So this tool is completed on all calls to the county DSS in which the caller states they are concerned about a child's safety, well-being, or care. This includes reports by telephone and all other means. The county DSS worker who takes the information from the reporter and the supervisor and leadership who provide the second level review. The tool is completed immediately after a report has been made or while the report is being made. The tool guides whether a report requires a CPS response and, if so, the maltreatment type and how quickly to respond. The worker selects all criteria alleged for each maltreatment type from the screening criteria and makes the screening decision. Reports not meeting any of the screening criteria will not be accepted for CPS response. If a worker identifies a maltreatment type present, the worker completes response time and assessment track. Certain maltreatment allegations, if selected, will dictate the response track and time. If no response track and time automatically populates, the worker chooses that. So there's actually several levels of people that this goes through before it is approved to be a case that they pick up, because they don't pick up everything. At my job, when I was calling things in, there were things that I called in that got screened out, and it was shocking to me, but it's just every state has such different criteria for what they pick up and what they don't, and it's really interesting and doesn't make a lot of sense to me, if I'm honest. The same day, initiated with the children, face-to-face interview with all household members, of a safety assessment, and a home visit. Now, to be thorough, there is also going to be a review of all county child welfare services records for previous contact with the family. So to give you an example of some of the unsafe living conditions that will go along under the physical neglect category, because like I said before, neglect is the most common report called in. So some unsafe living conditions. It says the child's physical living conditions are harmful and or contain hazards that have led or could lead to the child's injury or illness if not resolved. Consider the child's age and vulnerability when selecting the item. Examples may include, but are not limited to, the following. Number 1, housing that is an acute fire hazard or has been condemned. Number 2, exposed heaters, gas fumes, faulty electric wiring. Number 3, no access to fresh water, sanitary waste management conditions. Number 4, broken windows or stairs that pose a danger to children in the home. Number 5, vermin, human, or animal excrement. Next is insect or vermin infestations. Then we have firearms and ammunition that are unsecured, inappropriately stored, or easily accessible with the potential of being unsafely discharged. Next, inappropriately stored, unsecure, and or easily accessible hazardous, chemical, illegal, or prescription drugs, or other substances that pose a danger to the child. Next, exposure to methamphetamine or another drug manufacturing lab. And finally, persistent, unsafe sleeping conditions, particularly for infants younger than 1. So, let me stop here and discuss a few of these, okay? All right, so we have exposed heaters. Now, we all know because of the police reports that the police that went into the home that day put into the report that there were space heaters in the room, several. EJ then later went on to say that it was gym equipment, that they were mistaken. I do not believe that, but that is something listed here on unsafe living conditions, okay? Faulty electric wiring. We have not seen, but we have heard ex-mods talk about the wiring in the home is not done properly. That for sure, but it's been said. The firearms and ammunition that are unsecured and inappropriately stored or easily accessible. We know from the police report that that also was there. And then, I don't know if the persistent unsafe sleeping conditions would be considered. I think that they're talking more about like co-sleeping with infants younger than 1 because of, the possibility of rolling over on them or whatever. But if you look at these things, we know that law enforcement observed some of these conditions in the home. To me, this tells me that they made a report. And I don't care who she got on the phone to say they didn't make a report. Just because that one said he didn't make a report doesn't mean one of the other ones didn't. Whenever I read this, I was like, well, this makes perfect sense. I can understand. So another situation listed on here that would require CPS assessment is exposure to violence in the home. So again, I have mentioned this before. Whenever things about the incident between BJ and Craig came out, and then later she had this CPS assessment, right? And she kept saying that's the first time she's ever had CPS out there. She's never had any dealings with them before that. And I kept thinking that's super weird because we know that the police were there for a domestic violence incident And they also saw children in the home where it had happened. And I do not know of any law enforcement agency that would not be required to notify CPS about that situation. It doesn't matter if the children were hurt or not. The emotional damage of watching that and the chance that they might get caught in in the heat of the moment, it's a dangerous environment. And they go out to those. So I have a hard time believing that she didn't already have some sort of involvement from that domestic violence incident, because it says a child that has been exposed to or is aware of violence or other injurious environment in the home. This includes, but is not limited to, the following: siblings of children who are victims of abuse, child in a household where an adult is the victim of physical assault, the child has seen, heard, tried to intervene, or is aware of physical altercations, verbal threats of violence, or intimidation between adults in the home. There may be single incidents that resulted in injury or arrest of a caretaker or involve the use of a weapon, or there may be a pattern of behavior that would be of lesser concern if it was a single incident. So they are going to be concerned for these children just by what they're witnessing. What if one of them decided that they were going to, jump in and save mom and got hurt? So in my opinion, they became involved then. Now, another thing on here is substance-affected infant. Any infant born affected by substances that are not attributed to medical treatment, including medication-assisted treatment. Exposure is indicated by any of the following: infant has a positive toxicology screen, and there's medical impact on the child, such as hospitalization as a direct result of withdrawal. There is a demonstrated impact on the parent's ability to care for the infant, or there are other maltreatment concerns, including the parent's inability to care for the infant, or a pattern of substantiations or findings, and that will include no prenatal care in a high-risk pregnancy. If a birthing parent has a positive toxicology screen at delivery, other than as prescribed. So even if she is on a maintenance therapy drug, it will not be enough to trigger a visit unless the baby is experiencing withdrawal and has to be hospitalized. And this is why I was saying I think that she is not really understanding how the hospital is going to work whenever she's there, and that the baby is going to have issues withdrawing from the substance, and it's going to be hell on that baby. So, okay, and this one interested me too. Medical neglect. Physical health. The delay, refusal, or failure on the part of the caretaker to seek, obtain, and or maintain necessary medical, dental, hearing, and or vision care when the caretaker knows or reasonably should know that such action adversely impacts the child. The caretaker is missing or not scheduling appointments or other necessary medical, dental, or vision care, and this resulted in the child's deteriorating health, lingering illness, or exacerbating an injury. So, this one kind of struck a chord with me too, because we all know that BJ speaks about her kids missing school a lot. And that is just me listening to her streams. That's not me digging into her. That's not me asking for behind the scene information. That is just things that she flat out says on her streams. They miss a lot of school. Most schools have a policy where you get so many parent excuse days where, us as a parent, we can call in and say, hey, little Johnny's running the fever, so he's going to be home today, he won't be there. But once you reach a certain number of days missed, they start wanting a doctor's note saying what is going on, especially if it is consecutive days. The state that I live in, if you miss more than 3 consecutive days, you have to have a doctor's note. So we know that one was out for like a week, the beginning of the year. And then she said as soon as one was getting over it, the other one got it. And we could hear them in the background hacking and coughing and coming up to her crying, saying their throat hurt. She talks about them having fevers, all of this. And she kept saying, I'm taking him to the doctor. I'm going to take him to the doctor. I'm going to do it tomorrow. I don't think she ever did, honestly. And I think that they have Medicaid and it's probably free for her to do so. But she didn't want to be bothered. So as a school nurse, if I have a child that is chronically truant and I am not receiving any type of information that they're going to the doctor, no doctor's note, no information from BJ that she's doing anything for them, I'm going to be concerned and I'm probably going to make a report, because she turned around and sent that child to school after he had been out for, I think, over a week with this cough and everything. I'm assuming that he probably had a high fever going back to school, because that's usually the thing that they're like, oh, fever, no, we're not doing that. So I would be concerned too if a child had missed that much school and the day that they return, very morning they've already got a fever again and I have to call to have him picked up. That would be concerning to me. And when I call her and say, have you taken him to the doctor because strep is going around? He needs to be checked. And, she's like, oh, yeah, or whatever, makes an excuse or doesn't really sound convincing, or this has happened a lot in the past, which I think it probably has, then a school nurse can definitely make a report for medical neglect. And this would completely say why there was a worker that wanted to come to the child's doctor appointment, because either they scheduled the appointment because BJ wasn't doing it, or called and had BJ schedule it and said, we'll meet you there. We need to see that he's seen by a doctor. I find that very believable as something that could have happened. And so the next one that really struck me is called educational neglect. It says the caretaker does not meet the child's basic educational needs. The caretaker of a school-aged child ages 7 through 15 or age of enrollment if younger than 7 fails to ensure the child is provided with an education. Now, I know what you're thinking. He sends her kids to school. They're all honor students, according to her. But listed under this is a school-aged child has excessive, unexcused absences this academic year. And despite formal intervention by the school reports that the caretaker has been unable to be contacted, has been uncooperative with school officials, or cannot provide an appropriate explanation for the child's absences. And a school-aged child has excessive, unexcused absences this academic year that are impacting the child. So this is what goes right along with the medical neglect thing. As I was saying, if you have too many absences, and especially if it starts affecting their grades and ability to keep up in school, it's going to be a big deal. And, providing an education, that's the law. It has to be done. So that could also be something that was reported from the school. And like I said, this is all my opinion. I'm not saying that any of this is the exact reason why. And these are North Carolina specific policies that I am reading straight from the Policy and Procedure Manual for North Carolina DHHS, and it has been last updated March in 2025. So this is all accurate, up-to-date information, okay? So each case is going to have a safety assessment done, and a safety assessment must be developed during a CPS assessment to address the safety issues, and the caretaker's capacity to ensure safety must be completed and documented at the following intervals. At any point that a new CPS report is received, and at any point that new safety issues are revealed during the assessment phase. I was also looking up, because we hear BJ say all the time that she'll be in the middle of one CPS report and the person will be receiving new reports, 10 reports in a day or whatever. So I was kind of looking to see what they did with that, if they are receiving multiple reports while one is still ongoing. So it says, if the agency is contacted and provided with info regarding the same allegations and incidents that were in the initial report and they're already being assessed, the new info must be documented as a new intake on the structured intake tool and screened. But such circumstances do not require an initiation or new safety assessment. And then if the worker is contacted and provided with information that is not regarding the same allegations and incidents in the initial report, the county worker must treat info as a completely new CPS intake in the structured intake tool, and it must be screened, and then they start again with a new timeline that they have to respond and get the initiation done within their allowed timeline. And then if there is a new incident that happens during the course of an open assessment, the caseworker must treat the info as a new intake, respond within the appropriate timeframes to assess safety, and then combine it to be considered as part of the whole case decision. So let me go over that. Okay, so let's say they are on a call for, we're going to say, unsafe living conditions, okay? They get a call that there is exposed wires in the kitchen, and it's unsafe. The children can reach them. It's unsafe. So it meets the criteria to go out. They do the screening. They go out and do their initial contact and the assessment of the home. They discover that, yes, there are wires that are exposed, and they give a safety plan, an action plan, that those have to be repaired within 7 days, and they will check back. So 2 days later, they get another call that's reporting the same allegations about the wires being exposed. They document that. The intake will document that and screen it as if just like any other call, but it just adds onto the chart and they do not have to do the initiation or new safety assessment. It just gets combined into what they're already doing. Now, if they're investigating the wires and they get a call about medical neglect, they have to treat the medical neglect as a whole different case. And again, the intake person takes it in, screens it, and decides what time frame it needs to be initiated by and respond within that time frame, because that is a whole separate call and it's going to be treated separately. And also, if while they are investigating the wires, they happen to find something else, they happen to see, if during the course of looking at the wires, they notice that a child has been out sick for 7 days during that time, then they will fill out the standardized tool for that. And it has to, again, be responded within, it has to be addressed within a certain time frame, but it doesn't need a new safety assessment. It will be combined with what they are already doing. Hope that makes sense. And DJ keeps saying that if they find this, my child would not be here. If they find this, they're going to pull my child out of the home. That's just not true. Normally what happens is they're setting up collateral contacts that are people that are supportive in your life. When they come out, they find out who your safe people are, who are the people that support you, that are trustworthy, that know what's going on in the home, and they are in contact with them. If there is something in the home that needs to be fixed, they will send the child to that temporary person until it's fixed, and then the child comes back home. And so even in their policy manual, it states, diligent efforts to keep children with their families when possible is a requirement of CPS. The use of a temporary safety provider is one of many intervention options available for families to use during the assessment to address immediate safety concerns that can be resolved within a short time frame, such as faulty wiring, such as access to well water, things like that, things that can be repaired while the child is with that temporary safety provider. And the caseworker and the parent decide who can safely care for the child during that time. They work together to pick who fills this position. And the use of a temporary safety person should be a last resort and should not be done without first exploring if an intervention can be identified that will keep the child safe without the use of separation or restriction of a parent's access. They are trying to not do that. Like, their goal is to keep them in the home. They don't even want to have to use the temporary safety providers. They feel like the child is best in the home. But there's certain situations that are just unsafe and fixable, so they do utilize that. When they come in and tour a house, they are going to do a tour of all the areas where the child sleeps, eats, and plays. And in their policy book, it says, when touring the place where the child resides, it is important when there is a lack of resources, including housing that meets minimal standards, to consider the role of poverty. The Administration of Children and Families has issued policy encouraging states to explicitly exclude poverty from its statutory definition of maltreatment. Poverty alone does not equal neglect. A home visit where the alleged victim child resides must occur the same day as the victim is seen, even if the contact and interview of the child occurs in another location, such as the school, during the CPS assessment, and include observation and contact with every child living in the home. Then we have to assess the family's living environment and how it impacts child safety. The home assessment must specifically address fire safety, and the case record must contain documentation that fire safety has been discussed with the family. Firearm safety, and the case record must contain documentation that firearm safety has been discussed with the family at least once. I think there was some talk about one of the CPS visits that BJ eventually came out and admitted that there was some things she needed to do regarding sleeping arrangements, things like that. There were other things mentioned by various people. I don't know what's true, but what I do know is there was a week where BJ and Craig came on extremely loud, playing music loud, like it seemed odd. And we never heard the kids come into the room for like a week. Shortly after, when she pulls them out of bed and has them come tell people that they didn't go anywhere. But in my opinion, if they came in and found that they needed to get another bedroom for a child, they needed to get it cleared out, They came in and found that there were too many animals that were not vaccinated in the home. Those type of things, they are not going to just rip a child out of a home. What they're going to do is sit down with you and say, okay, we're going to make an action plan, and this is what you need to have done by this date. We're going to send your children to your temporary person, which is if people have them. Now, some people don't have people that they can rely on to take their kids, but so say Craig's mom, we can send the kids to Craig's mom, and they stay there for 7 days. I'll come back and make sure that this is corrected and that the home is safe, and then they come back home. If you haven't corrected it by this date, I'll extend the date. And then they'll do that for so many times until they don't, until you're not cooperating. But that could totally have happened. It would make sense to me, because even though she was telling us these cases are open and shut, as usual, she came back later to say, well, they did tell me that the boys were too old to be sleeping in the same bed, and I had to clean out this other bedroom for one, but then she went and bought more than one mattress. There was many things going on during that time that very much made it appear that CPS did find things in there that were not satisfactory. And this was also the time that she mentioned that CPS had reached out to family members, because she didn't mention that happening before. So that would make sense too if she had assigned her dad and his mom as her two collaterals. And once they found unsafe conditions, they sent the boys to stay with her while they corrected it, and then the boys came back. And this was also the time that there was working on the well, the well bladder. All of this stuff was going on. It's very suspicious. So that is my opinion of what happened. They came in and found things that were not safe for the kids, or just were not really good for the kids, or age appropriate, and they made an action plan and said, here's the date, we're going to come back here, and if it's done, everything's good. And I believe that BJ had her kids come on there and lie, because she would have no problem doing that. She would have absolutely no qualms with getting her 10 and 11-year-old out of bed, a school night, to come on and tell people that they didn't go stay the night anywhere. Ridiculous. And so because there are more things going on than just them coming into the home and looking around and talking to the kids, they are looking into other things. They're talking to school counselors. They're talking to law enforcement. They're getting any new records since the last time they were out there. They don't immediately open and shut these cases. Or they can tell you, like with me, they told me when they left, they said, we don't see anything that substantiates your case. But she said it will remain open for 30 days, and then you will receive a letter in the mail saying, our findings unsubstantiated. And on that, there is a number you can call to request your records. It will not have the caller's name on it, blah, blah, blah. And that's how they did it. So in North Carolina, case closure requirements. Within 45 calendar days of CPS report, prior to or at the time of case closure, there has to be a risk assessment done and a case decision summary done. And so that's kind of what I talked about. The risk assessment is their initial view of the home, and then they will reassess once things are fixed and kind of put where the house is. So when the next person comes out, they can tell if it's deteriorated or if there's a new risks there. And then a case decision summary, which will explain everything that happened within this specific case that they had. And so within 7 calendar days after they make their case decision of substantiation or services needed, they have to contact the family regarding that decision and then complete all of the documentation, because documentation is key and it sucks. So I wanted to look at some of the problems that we have, because people don't generally think about the people that are the caseworkers that do these jobs. The system is ill-equipped to address the underlying economic hardships, and this leads to a high volume of cases that overwhelm the available resources. Funding is often subject to shifting state and local economic conditions and budget priorities, and unfortunately, child welfare budget is not the top of the list for people at all. Staff turnover is a very big problem. They have unrealistic expectations of their workers. The lack of adequate funding leads to high caseloads for the social workers, which creates a high turnover rate and a hiring crisis, which further hinders the ability to provide quality service. I saw this when I worked in hospice, and you get into this vicious cycle of you don't value your employees, you don't pay them enough, people start leaving. when you're in a highly stressful, emotional position, like a caseworker or a nurse, it's extremely hard to recover when you get to the point that you've lost multiple people, because you will bring a new person in to train them. They're going to get overwhelmed because it's short staffed and think that it's always going to be that way and leave before they even finish their training. It becomes almost like this bottomless pit that you cannot fill. And like I said, I experienced this. It's whenever you cannot pay these people what they need to be paid. And I will tell you, the social workers that work for DSS do not get paid enough for their job. These people see the worst of the worst. They see humanity at its worst. They see and hear about horrible things done to children. And it's a thankless job. They're often villainized because if they go in and have to remove a child, you'll hear people talking about them yanking a child from a good family. If they leave a child in a home and something happens a month later, it's said that they failed that child. It's like they can't do anything right. They're constantly the villain. They're not appreciated. Nobody gets happy to see a CPS worker. So just imagine being in that position where you're underpaid, you're overworked. In North Carolina, most of them do not get their promised 40-hour work weeks. They work 50 to 60 hours because of the staffing issues. And that is a frequent thing everywhere. They prioritize other things. There needs to be more focus on preventative care instead of the afterthought. And I have spoken to a few CPS workers about this. The emotional toll that this job takes on them is massive. It's massive. They also get frustrated because they are bound by policies and red tape. They get frustrated. They can attend a trial where they are telling about something horrible that happened to a child and watch the judge decide to send the child back home with that parent, and they feel like their work was all for nothing. There's danger in going out on these visits because, again, like I said, people don't look forward to them coming. They are seen as someone who is only there to ruin their life, and that's not it at all. So there's a lot of danger in going out on these visits, and they are usually going alone into homes that they have no idea what they're going to walk into. A lot of times they don't have any administrative backing for the choices that they do make. And I can understand that too. We felt that way in hospice. You're kind of out there having to make your own on-the-fly decisions because you're the one in the home, in the field. The doctors, the administrators aren't. So you choose to do something that's in the policies, and then a negative result happens, and administration will throw you under the bus quicker than anything. And it sucks. It's really the reason why people don't want to go into these jobs. It's so much stress, work, underpayment. It's bad. I know that when I was working in the hospice field, and I'm not comparing my job anything, I could not do the CPS social worker job at all. I could not. And I know people say the same about hospice. We all know where we fit in. So, but the staffing part I can understand because we got to a point where the patient load was growing and growing, but our staff was not. So, and you have to have the administration above you that listens to you and will fight for you, will go and fight the budget and get more positions approved, but that rarely happens. So you end up, the people that you've had for years that are your good workers, you start loading them up with more work and more work and more work until they're constantly in mandatory overtime. They aren't getting raises. They are severely underpaid for the amount of emotional stress, physical danger, negative treatment, all of the things that they go through. It's just not worth it to some people. So then you kind of have like this mass exodus of workers. And when you're in an office like that, there's not that many workers in an office, in each county office. So whenever you have even two leave, it creates this giant gap that then the rest of the people have to fill in. You hire new people on. Well, these new people have to be trained by your, let's say, 3 staff members that are still working. So not only do those 3 staff workers that stayed there have to pick up the slack for the 2 workers that quit, they're also having to add on training the new staff. So they are doing double their job duty and training someone to do their job. These trainees are watching them struggle because you have to get this much done in a day. You've got time limits. There's nothing you can do about it. It has to be done. So sometimes you're rushing, sometimes I don't know if you're coming or going, and it's hard to stop and train someone and break each step down and still be efficient. So this person that's training is looking at all this going, is this what my day is going to be like? Am I going to be stuck here 10 hours a day, busting my ass to get in all these different homes and get this done, and then I get reprimanded by this person? And when they start seeing how overwhelmed the staff there is, they assume that that's a regular thing there. So then you have your trainees quit. And you're in this just never-ending black hole of you can't keep people there because they don't understand that what they're witnessing is not how it can be. I don't know if this makes any sense. I know to some it will, but the fact that if you were to come in and train for a job and it's supposed to be an 8-hour-a-day job and this number of cases a day and you go do them and you come back, you document whatever you do, and then you come in to train and you're having to stay 10-hour days, the person that's training you is running their ass off. They don't have time to stop and explain things. They're stressed. They're telling you how much they're stressed because that's just naturally what happens. You're going to look at that and be like, I don't want to do this job. I'm not getting paid that much. And you quit. And it's just, then it becomes this never ending cycle of people coming into training, quitting, coming into training. Some will get through training, stay for a month and quit. It's a horrible thing. And it's solved. And the main cause of underfunded child welfare services is a structural, historical reliance on federal funding mechanisms that prioritize foster care placement over prevention services, exacerbated by an overwhelming demand for services driven by child poverty. While child welfare systems are overwhelmed, the funding structure generally fails to provide adequate resources to keep families together, frequently confusing poverty with neglect. Inflexible funding structure has been heavily weighted towards covering the costs of out-of-home foster care rather than investing in preventative services that could keep children in their homes. Persistent child poverty, most reports to CPS involve allegations of neglect, which is often a direct reflection of poverty, such as lack of adequate food in the home, clothing that may be torn or stained, housing that is not up to date, not able to afford childcare, so the children end up getting left home alone, rather than actual willful abuse of the child. There's a high demand and an over surveillance. There's a high volume of child neglect reports, which is approximately 76% of all victims, which causes intense demand. Systemic issues, including bias against low-income families and families of color, can lead to over-surveillance, placing further strain on limited and underfunded services. Now, last year, North Carolina did pass Ryland's Law, and this was for several things. One of the things was to standardize documentation practices and improve the data collection to watch more closely the trends that are happening, and also the standardized documentation so that things are more consistent across the board in every county with how they handle cases and which cases are screened in and screened out. So a 2026 report indicates that nearly 46 states that report shortages in key areas like community-based mental health and behavioral health services. In 2022, about 50% of the 4.3 million referrals of alleged child mistreatment did not lead to investigation due to systemic limitations. Now, in North Carolina, in 2023, there's a total of 2,349,452 children in the state. There were 111,443 investigations. These are cases that were screened in. Of those 111,000, the actual number of child maltreatment victims was 23,737. Foster care entry rate was 2.2%, and fatalities from homes where maltreatment was present, 107. In 2024, the total number of children in the states, 2,360,302. There were 106,717 reports made to the child welfare system. Of the 106,717 investigations done, there were 25,478 actual child maltreatment victims found, and the foster care entry rate was 2.1%. The fatalities from the victims in the child maltreatment homes was 46. Now, the foster care entry rate is 2%, and this is telling us that they are coming in and ripping kids out of homes, and they will try to go to family first before they go to the foster care system. But before that, they're going to try to keep the child in the home. That is their goal. There's another issue with foster homes and funding towards that. In North Carolina in 2023, there were 5,616 licensed foster homes. The number of children needing placement in foster homes, 10,899. So we have double the amount of children needing a foster home than we have licensed homes. This is all a big issue. And poverty is definitely a big player in neglect. You have children that are coming to school and they don't look like they bathe very often. Their clothes are dirty. They're always hungry, and not all of this is purposeful neglect. It's because these families do not have the money to provide. They don't have the money to feed their children 3 meals a day, to buy new clothes, to repair things in the home that need repaired. And it's a very sad state that we're in, that the majority of the states have a huge amount of reports for neglect that are actually pan out to just be poverty. And there is a significant bias in lower income and families of color and how they get treated, and how that their cases may get handled differently and reported more frequently. It's just a hard problem. I don't know what the answer is to it. Like, there's so many, it's just kind of like the healthcare system. There's so many things that are broken in the system to get you there, right? There's so many different levels that get you to the point where it's like, this is not working. This is bad. How do you fix it? There's nothing is an easy fix. The economy is terrible. Federal funding is terrible. It's just like this trickle down effect where it all comes out with just shitty outcomes. I don't know how else to say it. Today, I feel like we live in a world where administrators and administration get paid the big bucks, and then the workers who are doing the actual hard work beneath them are getting slighted every day. I completely understand. I was reading an article in one county where they were asking administrators to go with them on visits to understand what it was like, the danger they were going into, the situations they were walking into, and they never got them to do it. And it's a shame because they really don't understand. I had a big wake-up call when I started doing hospice, and I was not rich growing up. I wasn't poverty level, but I wasn't comfortable level either. So I don't really judge much on houses and how they look and what you have and all that. But when I went into hospice nursing and started going into people's homes, it's shocking what is allowed. Like, people, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, it takes a lot for adult protective services or child protective services to have enough to do something about the situation. People are allowed to live in horrendous conditions as long as it's not hurting them. I had a patient that was a hoarder, and she had breathing problems, and she had her high-functioning autistic son was her caregiver, and he was legally blind. He could not see much, and there were things like I would come to visit, and they would have dead rats in Tupperware containers piled up on the table, and she had opened wounds, and I think I called Adult Protective Services a few times on her, trying to get her into a facility somewhere, but they would come out and talk to her and say that she is alert and oriented, and there's nothing they can do. People can choose to live how they want to live. And it's like this, it's hard to come to terms with that. It's hard to look at things like that and be like, this is okay. And I've experienced the same with calling in some CPS reports. The things that they do not consider to be abusive sometimes shocks me. But they have their own policies, and that's what they have to follow. So it doesn't always seem right to us or fair to us. They are obviously in the house. It doesn't matter if the house is dirty. It doesn't matter if bare floor, and they can have all of that things as long as it is not negatively impacting those children and not actively hurting them. Just because they have allergies, that's not going to be enough either. It takes quite a bit for them to deem someone unfit to take care of their self or their child. It's really difficult. And it should be in some ways, because if it was you and you were living in poverty and people kept reporting you because of the way your house looked or that your kid didn't have new clothes all the time, you wouldn't want your kids are ripped away from you just because of your life circumstances. We're at a point in the economy where people can work minimum wage jobs and work their butt off and barely scrape by. It's a real problem. I don't think a lot of us realize how good we have it. Even if you are living paycheck to paycheck, but you're still able to, get your favorite thing at the grocery, still able to splurge here and there, but you feel like money's tight. Even that is so much better off than so many people are right now. And if we're not exposed to it, we don't think about it, and it's sad. If you're not in the areas looking around, paying attention to what's going on, you're just living your life blindly because there are people who are falling victim to the system simply because they can't keep up. And there's so many reasons for it. It's not always because people are lazy. It's part of the thing that makes me so upset about BJ and Craig, who could get up and go work somewhere. They're healthy. They're able to lift boxes, mow, do all of this stuff. Why aren't they out there working and trying to do something? They are sitting at home on their butt, making more money than a lot of people who work 40-hour work weeks, and they just feel entitled to it. When you can go and find a young single mom who is working 2 minimum wage jobs, finding family to take care of her child, because childcare is another thing that is outrageously expensive, and she is barely getting by. I mean, scraping by, not living paycheck to paycheck, but going without. And we just tend to turn a blind eye to these people because we don't see it daily. I don't know what the answer is. There's got to be big changes in government. And as long as we all sit back and go with the flow and let things continue, it's never going to change. We need to speak up. We need to speak out. We need to not abuse systems. We need to really be mindful of what we're doing and how it affects other people. And I understand. I feel horrible for those little boys when I hear them and I know they're not getting the attention that I would give them. But at the same time, I also know it's not going to rise to the level of CPS saying that they are being abused. And it sucks because these children, in my opinion, are going to grow up to have emotional scars. They're not going to have fond memories of their childhood. They're going to struggle to adapt. They're going to be codependent. There's just so many things, but it's a really hard thing to accept. And if I hadn't done hospice, I don't know that I would understand that. So I don't know. It's just a mess. And I cover a lot of stuff, and I hope I didn't confuse you too badly. I don't know if any of y'all have heard of Chase Hughes, but he's on the behavior panel. He does so many interesting podcasts that I've watched some of those and been taking some notes, and that's what I'm going to cover on my next audio post. Some of behavioral things and what we can tell from certain people's demeanor and how they word things, and I think that'll be interesting. I know this CPS stuff is kind of depressing and not fun to listen to, but I just wanted to get some factual information out there because a caseworker's having a bad day, walks in and rips your kid away is false, and calling over and over on the same complaint isn't going to get more attention on it and get anything to happen. So I guess that is about it to finish this one up, and I hope that was somewhat clear. I feel like it was probably clear as mud, but try to get it put together and out, and maybe it'll help some understand how things work and how things are pulled in and what is wrong with the system from the state side looking in on the department. So yeah, our community is kind of in this chaotic state right now. I feel like everything's disjointed and disconnected and people are everywhere. And I see subs going around popping out every now and then and saying they're watching from the bushes and they're afraid to talk. They don't know where they're free to talk openly. They don't know who they're going to make angry if they mention in this chat or that chat. And they don't know who's getting along with who. And everybody's kind of going into covering different things in different areas. And it's hard. So I hope that everybody just hangs in there and remember that we are autonomous and we don't owe any creator our loyalty. We can go where we want to go. And if people are covering something that we enjoy listening to, we can go in there and chat. Nobody should be telling you where you can and can't go. And people shouldn't be getting upset with you about it. Now, it's different if you're going somewhere and you're like bashing the people that you normally hang out with. But if you're just going in because the topic is interesting, that's okay. Always, always keep in mind the parasocial relationship thing. Just because we feel connected to these creators, they don't necessarily feel the same way. We are not family to them. We are not, we are viewers. So don't let your emotions for certain creators wrap you up and keep you from going and talking where you want to. Nobody should do that to you. We're adults. We have earned the right to be where we are today. And just look out for yourself and your happiness and the people that you normally talk to. I'm sure that you'll see someone in the chats where you're going that you talk to normally and chat with them. Just don't let it keep you from chatting at all, because I know some people really need this for social interaction and have used it for their entertainment, and it's hard to adjust to this. It's a quite a transition for the whole community right now, and it sucks. I'm not gonna lie, it sucks. I don't chat as many places at all anymore either, because you don't know who's upset with who and what is okay to be discussed and what isn't, and it's it's difficult. So hang in there, do what you want to do. If someone gets mad at you about it, that's their problem. And that's it for now. So I hope everybody has a great week coming up, and I will talk to you soon.